Imagine a chemical, one that once it's out there, just, well, it refuses to leave. It doesn't really break down. It just persists. In our environment, our food, even, inside us, we're talking about forever chemicals, and they're a much bigger deal than you might think.
That's right.
Today, we're doing a deep dive into and polyfluoroalkyl substances. PFAS, for short.
PFAS.
And these aren't just some abstract scientific terms. They're literally in, well, countless things we use every day. Our goal here is for you to really get a handle on what PFAS are, why they're such a challenge, and crucially, how we can actually monitor them effectively, especially in a vital water source like the Potomac River watershed. We'll be drawing on some pretty groundbreaking recent research.
It's a really important topic. And PFAS, as you said, it's actually a huge group of chemicals, man-made. They first came about in the 1940s.
Right.
And their properties just made them incredibly useful for, well, all sorts of industries.
And it's those properties, isn't it, that give them that nickname, forever chemicals. Why are they so persistent? You mentioned they don't break down easily.
It really boils down to their chemistry, their molecular structure.
Okay.
PFAS molecules have these carbon-fluorine bonds. And these are among the strongest bonds known in organic chemistry. Super stable. So they resist heat, water, oil. They don't get broken down by sunlight or microbes easily at all. That's the persistence. And that means they build up, bioaccumulate.
So the very thing that made them useful, that indestructibility, is exactly why they're such a headache now.
Precisely.
We're talking about things like nonstick cookware, right?
Teflon.
Teflon's the classic one, yeah. But also stain-resistant fabrics, waterproof clothing, even some food packaging.
Food packaging.
And critically, firefighting foams, especially those used at airports and military bases for fuel fires.
Right, AFF.
AFFF, exactly. So their usefulness meant they got used everywhere.
Yeah.
And now we find them pretty much globally. Soil, water, wildlife, and unfortunately in people too. And that persistence, it comes with a real cost. Studies have started linking some PFAS to some pretty serious health concerns.
Yes.
Things like increased risks for certain cancers, hormone disruption, developmental issues in kids.
That's right. Hormone disruption, developmental effects in infants and children, problems with the immune system, even links to higher cholesterol. It's a concerning list.
It really is. It makes it very personal, doesn't it? Beyond just an environmental issue.
Absolutely. The health angle is huge. And connecting that to the environment, well, we're finding PFAS widely in drinking water sources, rivers, groundwater, especially near places where they were made or used heavily for years.
Like old manufacturing sites,
Yeah.
military bases.
Exactly. Those are often hotspots. Now, governments and scientists are, definitely working on it. Regulations are coming in. Some PFAS are being phased out. There's research into how to remove them, but it's a massive challenge, a really big undertaking.
A monumental task, yeah. And that immediately makes you think, how does this play out in a place like the Potomac River? A system that's so huge and so critical. Let's maybe pivot to that specific case study, PFAS in the Potomac.
Good idea. It's a perfect example of the complexities.
So for anyone listening who isn't familiar, the Potomac River watershed, it's not just, one river, it's vast.
It really is.
It covers something like 14,670 square miles across parts of Pennsylvania, Maryland, West Virginia, and D.C. itself.
And it supports a huge population. About 7 million residents rely on it.
7 million. So it's an absolutely critical water supply.
Absolutely. Just to give you a sense of scale, the Potomac provides roughly 500 million gallons of water per day just to the D.C. metro area.
Wow.
That's supplying major utilities. D.C. Water, Fairfax Water, WSSC, Loudoun Water, and then you have its big tributaries like the Shenandoah River, the Anacostia. They all feed into this system.
So understanding PFAS here really means understanding it for millions of people.
Directly, yes.
Okay, so in such a massive interconnected system, where are these forever chemicals actually coming from? What are the main inputs into the Potomac?
Well, the sources are pretty diverse, which, reflects how widely these chemicals were used. Big ones include military bases.
Right, the firefighting foam.
Exactly. AFFF used near airfields, training areas, across Maryland and Virginia particularly. Then you've got industrial facilities, places involved in manufacturing, metal plating, coatings, textiles. They could discharge directly.
Right.
Wastewater treatment plants are another major pathway.
Because they don't remove PFAS.
Pretty much. Conventional treatment just wasn't designed for these types of chemicals. So PFAS mostly pass right through and end up in the treated effluent that goes back into the river.
So wastewater is a big conduit. What else?
Then there's landfills. Leachate, that's the liquid that drains from the waste, can carry PFAS from all the discarded consumer products, wool carpets, packaging, clothes.
Right. Makes sense.
And of course, urban runoff, just rainwater washing over cities and suburbs, picking up PFAS from, treated surfaces, leaky products, dust, and carrying it into storm drains and rivers.
It sounds like it's woven into, well, everything. Modern life, basically.
It kind of is, yeah.
And that means it finds its way into the water from almost every angle. And our sources point to specific hotspots, areas of real concern.
Yes, definitely. Places like the Shenandoah and Occoquan reservoirs are mentioned. Those are directly tied into drinking water supply, so that's a major concern.
Okay.
The Anacostia River and the tidal part of the Potomac also stand out, likely due to heavy urban runoff and lots of wastewater inputs.
Yeah. And the military sites you mentioned, like Joint Base Andrews, Fort Detrick.
Those often show up as well, yes, due to the historical AFFF use primarily.
And this feeds into the challenges for the water suppliers, right? The utilities.
Absolutely. These concentrated sources contribute to what the utilities have to deal with. Many of them in the watershed are already testing for PFAS regularly. It's part of the EPA's program, the Unregulated Contaminant Monitoring Rule, UCMR. They track emerging stuff.
Okay.
But here's the really critical part. Some of the levels they're finding are close to, or sometimes even over, the EPA's new proposed limits for drinking water. The ACLs, maximum contaminant levels.
Those are the legally enforceable ones.
Well, they will be once finalized. But the proposed levels are incredibly low. For PFOA and PFOS, the two most well-known PFAS, the proposal is just 4 parts per trillion.
4 parts per trillion, that sounds minuscule.
It is. It's like a few grains of sand in an Olympic swimming pool. But the concern is the potential health effects even at those very low levels, especially over a lifetime of exposure. So this isn't some, far-off theoretical issue. It's a very real, immediate concern for everyone drinking that water.
That really puts it into perspective. Okay, let's shift slightly. This brings us to a really interesting aspect. How different types of land use might affect PFAS levels.
Right. The landscape itself matters.
We might think of a forest, as being pretty clean. Forests make up over half the watershed, about 53%. They act as natural filters in some ways, but they can't actually break down PFAS, can they?
No, they can slow the movement, maybe hold on to some in soils, but they don't destroy the chemicals. Developed land, though, about 15%. That's different.
Yeah, you'd expect higher PFAS runoff there. From cities, suburbs, all the infrastructure and products.
Logically, yes. More sources, more impervious surfaces, meaning faster runoff. Wetlands, too, about 6%, they can be interesting. They can act like sinks, where PFAS might accumulate in the sediments and the wildlife.
Okay. And then there's agriculture. Covers about a quarter of the watershed, 25%. And this is where things get maybe a little counterintuitive.
This is where we find a pathway that often surprises people, yes.
Yeah, this point really jumped out at me from our sources. You'd normally think, okay, farmland, maybe fewer industrial chemicals, right? Mm-hmm. But the research suggests that an area that seems mostly agricultural, like Occoquan Creek was mentioned, a tributary of the Shenandoah, it could actually show high PFAS levels. Mm. That feels backwards. How does that happen?
You've hit on a really key point. It seems counterintuitive, but there are several reasons why an agricultural area like Occoquan might have elevated PFAS. Mm. Probably the biggest one, and the most surprising to many, is biosolids.
Biosolids. That's treated sewage sludge.
Exactly. Treated sewage sludge. It's often applied to farmland as fertilizer because it's rich in nutrients. But remember how we said wastewater plants don't really remove PFAS?
All right. They pass through.
They pass through and actually get concentrated in these sludge, the biosolids.
Yeah.
So when that's spread on fields, PFAS are spread too. Rain washes it off into streams.
So the connection is through our waste system, even out in the country.
Precisely. And related to that, even rural areas have wastewater sources. Smaller treatment plants or septic systems, they still release PFAS from household products, detergents, cleaners, maybe even clothing fibers washed off.
Okay, that makes sense.
Then there are potential agricultural inputs themselves. Historically, some pesticides or soil treatments might have contained PFAS used as surfactants chemicals that help them spread or stick. That's less common now, but legacy contamination could persist.
Right, historical use.
And finally, you can't rule out legacy or regional factors. Occoquan Creek, for example, is near Winchester, Virginia. That area has some light industry, municipal wastewater. Plus, there could be other regional sources like old landfills or maybe firefighting training sites somewhere upstream in the valley, affecting groundwater that eventually feeds the creek.
So the big takeaway here is Our mental map of clean rural areas needs an update when it comes to PFAS.
Yes,
It shows these hidden connections, especially back to wastewater, that can create unexpected hotspots even in agricultural settings.
That's really crucial for monitoring, isn't it? You can't just focus on cities and industry.
Exactly right. And that interconnectedness, the fact that PFAS moves through wastewater, through biosolids across the landscape,
Yeah.
that's precisely why it doesn't care about county lines or state borders.
Right. Contamination upstream in, say, West Virginia or Pennsylvania can absolutely affect water quality down here in D.C. or Maryland.
Absolutely. Which makes tackling it really tricky for any single town or county or even state.
So how do you manage that? How do you get everyone on the same page across such a big, politically fragmented region, especially when everyone's drawing water from the same shed resource?
Yeah, that's the challenge. And that's where organizations like the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments, MWCO, or COG for short, become really essential.
Oh, COG. Okay.
Yeah.
What is that exactly?
Yeah.
It's basically a regional planning body. It brings together 24 local governments, cities, and counties from D.C., Maryland, and Virginia, plus state agencies, water utilities, other key players.
So it's not like a regulatory agency telling people what to do, more like a meeting place, a facilitator.
That's a great way to put it, a forum and facilitator. Its whole purpose is to help coordinate on issues that cross boundaries, things no single jurisdiction can solve alone. Water supply is a classic example, and now emerging contaminants like PFAS.
Okay, so how does COG actually help with PFAS management specifically? What's their role?
Well, it's kind of multifaceted. First, they have a long history in water supply coordination. COG hosts two really important groups, the Interstate Commission on the Potomac River Basin, or ICPRB,
ICPRB, right.
and the Section for Cooperative Water Supply Operations on the Potomac, known as COP. These groups are where the major water utilities coordinate how they manage withdrawals from the river, especially during droughts. It's a vital platform for sharing data and planning related to water quality and quantity.
So they already have the utilities talking to each other about the river.
Exactly. Building on that, for PFAS and emerging contaminants, COG has specific regional committees that are actively looking at these issues now. Because PFAS is an interstate problem, COG helps align things like testing methods, how different jurisdictions respond from a policy perspective, even how they talk to the public about it.
The public messaging part seems really important.
It is. You don't want different counties giving conflicting information.
Yeah.
Right? That just creates confusion and erodes trust. COG helps standardize that public communication.
Okay, good point.
And finally, COG can play a role in funding and advocacy. They can collectively lobby for federal or state money to help pay for really expensive water treatment upgrades. Things like GIC filters, granular activated carbon, or reverse osmosis, RO systems.
Those are the technologies that can actually remove PFAS.
Yes, they're effective, but they're very costly for individual utilities to build and operate. So COG can help make the case for regional funding support.
So putting it all together, COG is kind of the glue. It helps hold together all these different efforts, utilities, counties, regulators, so they can actually work towards a unified strategy.
That's a perfect analogy. The glue. It prevents everyone from just doing their own thing in isolation. For a regional problem like PFAS in the Potomac, that kind of coordination is absolutely essential. It really highlights the power of collaboration.
Okay, so that coordinated approach, that foundation, that leads us directly into how you actually build trust in the data itself, which sounds fundamental.
It is fundamental.
Yeah.
And this initial 12-month study that's been discussed, it's really designed as a foundation-building project.
Oh, okay. Not immediately chasing sources, though.
Not immediately, no.
Yeah.
The main goal is to set up a consistent, reliable monitoring framework across the whole watershed. The objectives are pretty clear.
Yeah.
1, figure out what factors influence PFAS levels. 2, measure PFAS consistently everywhere. And 3, develop a model, a blueprint, for how monitoring should be done long-term.
So establishing the how and the where reliably before you jump to the who or the what next makes sense. Let's break that down. When you talk about where to sample the siting strategy, what goes into deciding those locations? How do you capture hotspots, understand sources generally, and track transport to water intakes?
It's a strategic design with several layers. First, you stratify by land use. You deliberately pick sites in forested areas, agricultural areas, urban, suburban spots, and places with mixed uses. That helps capture the different potential inputs.
Okay, different land types.
Then, you think about the hydrologic hierarchy. You sample from the small streams, the headwaters, all the way down the system to the main river, especially near the points where utilities draw their drinking water.
Headwaters to intakes. Got it.
And crucially, you use upstream-downstream brackets. You pick pairs of sampling points, one above, one below major features like where a large tributary joins the main river or where a big wastewater treatment plant discharges.
To see the change.
Exactly. Not necessarily to pinpoint that one source right away in this phase, but to capture the overall variability and the potential impact of those major inputs or changes in the river system.
Makes sense.
You also include reference sites. These are streams believed to be minimally impacted, maybe in heavily forested areas, to give you a baseline what clean looks like in this region.
A control group, sort of.
Kind of, yeah. And finally, whenever possible, you try to co-locate your sampling points with existing USGS stream gauges.
The flow monitoring stations.
Right, because those gauges measure stream flow, how much water is moving. If you have the concentration of PFAS and the flow, you can calculate the mass load, how much actual PFAS is moving past that point over time. That gives you a much richer picture than just concentration alone.
That's a really thoughtful way to pick the spots. But, okay, you've got your locations, the how you sample, the consistency, the quality assurance, quality control, QA/QC that sounds like, where the trust is really built or lost.
Absolutely critical. You need incredibly robust field and lab protocols. You want to minimize any chance of contamination or error, and you need to be sure that a result from Site A is truly comparable to Site B, collected maybe months apart.
So what does that involve, practically?
Well, first, using standardized methods. Relying on established EPA methods like 533 and 537.1 for drinking water, and the newer, more comprehensive method, 1633, for things like river water or wastewater.
Okay, standard tests.
Then, consistency is just paramount. Using the exact same list of PFAS chemicals, the analytes at every site, every time. That includes the well-known legacy ones like PFOA and PFOS, PFHXS, but also important shorter chain ones and precursor PFAS.
Precursors, what are those?
Those are compounds that aren't maybe as persistent themselves, but they can actually transform or degrade into the more persistent PFAS like PFOA or PFBS once they're out in the environment. Things like PFBA, PFBS, or a common one called 6.2 FTS, you need to track those too.
Okay, so the whole family.
The whole relevant family. And you use the same reporting limits, the same analytical laboratory for the whole year if possible, just to minimize any variability from the lab side.
Wow, okay. Consistency is key. What about timing?
Good question. The temporal design involves regular sampling, typically quarterly, at all the sites. That captures seasonal differences, winter, spring, summer, fall, high flow, low flow.
Right.
And you might add optional event sampling at key sentinel sites, trying to capture what happens during big rainstorms, that first flush of runoff that can carry a lot of contaminants.
Okay. And the QA/QC, the quality checks.
That has to be rigorous. We're talking about things like field blanks, trip blanks, equipment blanks, basically samples of clean water processed alongside the real samples to check for any contamination introduced during collection or transport. Plus, taking duplicate samples frequently, maybe 10% of the time, to check for consistency.
And you even have to be careful about what you wear.
Oh yeah. It sounds extreme, but you have to avoid any sampling equipment containing PTFE, which is Teflon. Staff are often asked to avoid using personal care products with fluorinated ingredients on sampling days, or even wearing waterproof gear treated with PFAS. You have to be meticulous to prevent accidental contamination of these very sensitive samples.
That is an incredible level of diligence just to ensure the data is clean.
It has to be, if you want the results to be defensible and trusted.
So you're measuring the suite of chemicals with incredible care. Beyond the concentrations themselves, what are you really trying to understand in this first phase?
It really is about the context as much as the numbers themselves. We're measuring that specific list of PFAS, yes. But the primary focus of this initial foundational 12-month study is understanding their distribution, where are they showing up, their frequency, how often are they detected, and their variability, how do levels change across different locations, land uses, and seasons. We're explicitly not trying to do definitive source tracking or attribution in this phase. It's all about building that solid, trusted data foundation first. That's absolutely critical before you can move on to asking more targeted questions about specific sources or impacts.
Got it. So after this really rigorous 12-month study wraps up, what are the tangible outcomes? What do you actually get from all this meticulous planning and sampling?
Well, the most immediate outcome is exactly what we've been talking about. A reliable, high-quality baseline data set. This shows PFAS concentrations across the entire watershed, measured consistently over a full year.
Okay, the baseline data. What else?
From that data, you get crucial insights into seasonal variability. Do levels go up in the spring melt? Do they spike after big summer storms? How do they compare to dry, low-flow periods? You also get a much clearer, data-driven understanding of how those different land use categories we talked about, urban, ag, forest, actually correlate with the PFAS levels you're seeing.
Starting to connect the dots.
Exactly. And all of this culminates in what you could call a monitoring playbook, version 1.0.
I have a play.
Yeah, basically a set of concrete recommendations for future monitoring efforts. It would suggest which sites are most important to keep monitoring long-term, the sentinel sites. It would recommend the optimal sampling frequency based on the variability observed. And it might identify certain triggers, like if levels at a key site exceed a certain threshold, that would warrant more intensive follow-up investigation.
That sounds incredibly valuable. Okay, so connecting this back to the bigger picture, this foundational work, it's more than just data collection, isn't it? It's setting the stage for everything that comes next.
Absolutely. That's the real strategic value. This foundational study creates a trusted, scientifically defensible basis that everyone can, utilities, regulators, researchers, the public can actually believe in.
Builds that common ground.
Precisely. It builds the necessary infrastructure, the understanding, the reliable methods, so that then in later phases you can confidently explore those more targeted questions we mentioned.
Like pinpointing specific sources.
Yes. Really digging into potential contributions from specific wastewater treatment plants or areas with heavy biosolids application or major stormwater outfalls or those military and industrial sites. It also helps utilities understand their specific treatment needs. Do they need to upgrade? Where? How much? And it allows for analysis of potential risks across different populations or geographic areas within the watershed.
So it ensures that future work, future decisions are based on solid, consistent, and scalable data.
Exactly. It makes the whole effort defensible, consistent, and capable of growing into a truly robust, long-term, regional PFAS monitoring network. It's that essential first step towards actually managing this incredibly complex challenge effectively.
You know, the story of PFAS in the Potomac, it really isn't just about chemicals and water, is it? It feels like a testament to how deeply interconnected our environment is.
It really does.
And it shows how crucial that coordinated, science-driven action becomes when you're facing a problem that, quite literally, doesn't respect any boundaries. It really makes you wonder, what will you look for differently in your own community's water story now? We really hope this deep dive helped you understand the sheer complexity of PFAS, the challenges involved in just monitoring these persistent chemicals, and why collaboration and solid science are just, well, they're absolutely vital if we want to protect these shared resources we all depend on.
Couldn't agree more.
Thank you for joining us for the deep dive.